Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call this regular business meeting of the Loveland Board of Education to order at 6 p.m. and ask our treasurer for a roll call.
Ms. Cecil,
Here.
Reverend Eiler,
Here.
Dr. Lorenz,
Here.
Dr. Schwetchnow,
He will be arriving apace.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here. So we'll note his arrival. He's caught in traffic at the moment. And I will ask you all to rise and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Board members, you received this last week. The only changes are a couple of human resource items, and then there was an addition of a business manager item. If you looked at it on Friday, that got added after Friday. So could we have a motion to approve that agenda?
So moved.
Mrs. Washburn moved
Second.
and Ms. Cecil seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, can we vote on that?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Ms. Cecil,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes, motion carried. Next item is the minutes of September 19th, and I will move that we approve those minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
And that was Mrs. Washburn, correct? Correct. Are there any additions, corrections, or questions about the minutes? All right, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on those?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes,
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Ms. Cecil,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler.
Yes.
motion carried. I would like to welcome our guests this evening. It's always good to see a number of folks here and let those know. Mr. Samuels, we're recording, correct? Everything seems to be working this evening for our, I shouldn't say that, should I? I believe we have a new computer. We've been working really hard to get these recordings to work smoothly, and we believe it's working so far this evening. We do have a backup camera. Should something happen, we'll set that to recording as well. But for those who are listening to the meeting, we are also live streaming, correct, Mr. Samuels? Okay, so we're live streaming, we're making a recording, and we are meeting here in person in the Middle School Intermediate Media Center. I would like to welcome you all here this evening. I would like to note that we have 2 of the 4 candidates running for school board here this evening. Of course, Ms. Cecil up here at the table, and Lynn Mangan is in the audience. There are 2 others. I'm pretty sure that we just have those 2 here this evening. So I'd like to welcome you. I would also like to welcome anyone who is here or anyone who is listening to let you know that there is a meeting tomorrow evening in the cafeteria, I think, for board candidates tomorrow evening at 7. Keep mixing up my times. And then the following evening, for any of you who live within the city limits, for city council candidates on Thursday evening. So invite you to attend those events here in the school. I will now ask for hearing of the public. Mr. Giuffre, do we have anyone signed up?
We do not.
Okay, no one signed up this evening. Okay, then we will move on to, as I have always mentioned, the administrator reports. Those are in the in board docs so that board members can prepare for the meeting by looking at those administrator reports. There are also reports from the buildings. I know those are going to be shared with us. The substance of those are going to be shared with us by student representatives. But if you hear anything in the student representative reports that you want to check on, confirm a date or something, you usually can find them in the administrator reports. And I will then move on to my board president report. I apologize, it's slightly long this evening. Several things to mention. First of all, I'll report that Great Oaks students have begun to get their job placements. Many of you know that in attending Great Oaks, it's not only career and technical courses that they take there, but they often have the opportunity to have a job placement. And so Great Oaks has begun to make note of those. I do not see any Loveland students on the Live Oaks report this month, but I certainly will let you know when I see job placements for them. I also will note that there are special events for parents of 6th to 10th graders. Unfortunately, one of them has already happened. There is a virtual one on Thursday, October 19th, and then Thursday, November 9th, there is another one. So anyone interested in Great Oaks could pick this up, or I can get you the link to see the Great Oaks presentation, begin to let students know what happens at the Oaks so that they can begin to prepare. I will note, as I'm sure you are all well aware, Ohio school districts have been watching what will happen to funding and policies as a result of the recent budget bill. OSBA has been helping us. There are already some things that have come out of the budget bill that are affecting policies, and I'll talk about those in a minute. We're all watching to see what will happen with House Bill 187. I believe that Mr. Giuffre is going to report on that. And then, of course, we're all watching to see what will happen with the Department of Education. So some things are up in the air at the moment. We have a lot of things to be concerned about. I will report that I attended an event on October 7th called Advocate for Education. Welcome, Dr. Swetchenow. So we'll note that he came in. And several people, when I attended it there, this is a group of people, they have set up something called School Board School. A lot of the folks who are part of this belong to the Cincinnati Public School, but there are suburban districts that were in attendance there. And several people asked me what I was doing there. And I said, well, I'm beginning to consider how I will advocate for education after I'm not on the school board anymore. So I went to that event, but I did pick up some voting materials. So I brought those along again, if anyone would like to look at those from that event. I can report to you that policy work with OSBA is about half completed. It doesn't look like we're going to be ready for final approval at the November meeting. What we are doing is crosswalking the OSBA policies that will become our policies with what we currently have. We had rescinded many. We have a lot of Neola policies. And so we are confirming that those policies conform with what we already have as Loveland policy. We are looking at just a few policies that may need some updating, in particular, some that need to be updated based on the budget bill. So when this comes to board approval, it will not be the huge amount of work that you think it might be. You will be adopting the complete manual, but for the most part, you will be assured that those are the policies that are already in place, and here are the ones that you need to look at. So I'm just letting you know that we're getting there. Not quite done yet. I did want to report on communications received by the board since the last meeting. We did receive a very welcome report from parents about the success of a recent Loveland graduate. That's the kind of communication that we're always happy to receive. We did receive 2 communications regarding financial reporting and board agenda items. The first item that we received, the first email that we received, requested a written response from the board. And so that request was forwarded to Mr. Giuffre as well as to individual board members. It has been entered into the records request log and has been determined to be an information request rather than a records request. And so that can be noted in the log, as well as the response from the board would be, in my opinion, but I'm asking for your opinion on this, that there are not records responsive to that that request, and that information is financial reporting that we do. So I'm asking if the board is in agreement with that response, or if there's discussion that you want to have about that particular communication.
Did we identify the specific request?
It's quite each board member received the communication, and it was a request for specific financial reporting concerning the 5-year forecast.
Right. And the question is, shouldn't we be doing?
Shouldn't we be doing what?
Shouldn't we be doing the analysis that was requested? Just as a matter of course of business.
So when we discussed in the agenda meeting, what we discussed was that we felt like that the relevant information was available in financial reports, and we've got specific information that we're going to hear tonight that we thought also addressed another portion. We didn't feel like, because it was not a records request, it was an information request, that we were in fact providing the information that.
So can we put that to the end of the meeting until we see what's presented?
Put what to the end of the meeting? Agreement of that response? Okay, that's fine. We don't have to do that. Again, my feeling was that either has been reported or when the 5-year forecast is adopted would be reported, those kinds of things. At any rate, I do want to be sure that the board understands that on the public records request, it would be noted that it was an information request and that there were not records to be posted in the public records request. Okay. The second communication requested board action. It was received after the meeting agenda had already been set. Again, some items may be covered in regular reports this evening, and some may have been covered in past reports. So I'll just mention a couple of items and then again, board consensus as to information that's needed. I just want to remind the board and audience that committees that have board member participation are administrative meetings with board member volunteers. These meetings serve to assist in the communications that come to the full board for discussion and possible action. When Mr. Doherty resigned, Reverend Eiler immediately volunteered to participate in finance meetings. The other groups include 1 or 2 board member volunteers. So they are standing at what was established at the beginning of the year, which again was voluntary participation in administrative meetings. So the treasurer has a finance committee meeting, the business manager occasionally has facilities meetings. Sometimes those are in combination with the finance. Policy is me. And so I spend quite a few Zoom meetings reading policies. Dr. Swetchnow has said he will help if he needs to, but so far there's just one person there. And then I believe on the Student Experience Committee, it's Mrs. Washburn and Reverend Eiler, who in fact just came from a meeting with information about that. So that is my assessment of the board
Can I ask a quick question?
participation in committees.
That's an accurate reflection of my understanding as well. And I'm not sure that I necessarily understand this question. Is there a reason, and does it fall under sunshine laws, if that we can only have 2 board members on each committee? Meaning, could the 3 of us participate, or is that a meeting just because we're there talking about it?
It's an area that we have chosen to limit board participation to 2 people to avoid the appearance of a discussion of board business. In my understanding, there is not discussion of nor decision about board action in any of these meetings, but in general, we aim to avoid any appearance of any time when anything is discussed that might become board business. There are only 2 people at the most.
And that was my understanding of it as well, but I wasn't sure if that was because we were being very careful to, because of past criticisms, be careful to make sure that we're covered by sunshine laws, or if that was really a well-known fact. And again, to me, as an administrative committee in which board members are asked to participate, and we're not making decisions about board-related business, I can see how I would argue that that wouldn't fall under the sunshine laws, and all 5 of us could go to the facilities committee meeting if we wished. And I bring it up particularly because we have a new member who wasn't here when we said all of that, who expressed an interest in being on the finance committee. Should we ask for legal counsel's opinion? I'd hate to block somebody out who wants to participate.
I believe that we have asked for legal opinion and have been advised that it is wise not to have 3 members participate. So if we were interested in having Ms. Cecil participate in a committee, she could sit and look at policy information with me if she wanted to, or one of
Wait,
the
I'm on that
members-
committee.
One of the members of the committee could say,
But I'm sure
okay,
you
we're
bow
having a
out.
meeting and you can come instead of me that time. For example, to give you an example of an even different kind of thing, we have community meetings. We have meetings, the showcase. We have meetings where all board members are interested in being there. And we try to be very careful that we do not sit as board members, do not propose anything as board members there, gathering information. So technically, I believe the answer to your question is 3 people could sit at that meeting, but that we have had legal counsel advice that it is much better to have 2 people sit there than 3 or 4 or 5. So I would suggest that the way to handle it is to talk amongst yourselves and decide who is going to attend any future meetings. I don't believe there are any more facilities meetings scheduled for this year, but one may come up. I don't know what the finance committee, what Mr. Giuffre is looking for in finance participation.
Well, any board member can make an appointment to come see me at any time. I don't get a lot of opportunity to share my knowledge with folks, so I'm welcome.
But if the finance duo, the dynamic finance duo wanted to share, they could do so. Are both of you serving on facilities or are just you on facilities? Okay, so if there
I'm the
is a
only one on
facilities,
facilities right now.
okay. So you could also participate on that. Same thing for student experience. Mrs. Washburn and Reverend Islet could offer a space there. Okay, the final item that I have in my report is to remind the board, as if you need to be reminded, that last month, Mr. Giuffre, our treasurer, resigned effective at the end of the year. I will first note that ever since Mr. Giuffre was appointed, his title was interim treasurer. He was here on a limited contract. He was not here on a term contract. And so the board has been aware of and has considered the need to appoint a permanent treasurer, even as Mr. Giuffre was serving excellently in the capacity as the real treasurer, as it were. There is in fact staff in place in the treasurer's office that can handle the daily work of the department. And we could even continue to contract with Mr. Giuffre after the first of the year if our work in appointing a permanent treasurer was not done by December 31st. But I would like to ask the board consensus to consider the process and employment of a treasurer at the November 14th meeting. This discussion can take place both in executive session for the employment of a public employee, as well as during open session of the board. And I would just ask if there are questions about this and if there is additional information that the board needs prior to that November 14th meeting. We're going to talk about you, Mr. Giuffre, and your replacement.
What have we done? to fill a replacement at this point?
What have we done to this point? We have not done anything to this point as a board to
So the-
fill a
so the
replacement.
November 14th meeting is to set that up.
To set the process and to consider employment.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay, that's all my report, unless anybody has questions. I neglected to note, we're going to move to student representative reports, but before we do that, I did not note that Mr. Broadwater is not here this evening. He had been away, and I believe his plane may have landed at the airport, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, he was not able to make the meeting this evening. So that is why he is not here. So unless there are any questions about my report, we'll move on to the student representative reports. And do you folks know how you're handling this? Who's on first? Okay, and we'll have you come up to this microphone.
When do you want us to give our report?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't ask, did I?
Okay, we'll go after.
Okay, all right, thanks. I didn't know that there were other reports. I do normally ask,
We
so
do.
yes.
So I will be reporting on LECC, LPS, and LES. So to begin, we have ongoing department projects in these buildings. All schools have completed data reviews, which help ensure a thorough understanding of each student's performance and kind of where they're at academically. Each school has reading improvement plans in place now as well to report on students and their reading skills and how we can improve them as the year progresses. K through 2 level teachers are now using the Seesaw platform, which is loved by students everywhere. I've heard great things about the Seesaw platform. It allows students to practice at their own pace while also giving them a good challenge. Next, we have staff and student accomplishments. Now at LES, they are offering pizza with the principals for Terrific Tigers, which is a great way to offer an incentive for kids to really express our core values of care, respect, and responsibility. Congratulations to LPS and LES as their book fair raised nearly $2,000. And all of these proceeds went to the Cincinnati Children's Hospital and for scholarships to kids who may be in poverty and in need of these scholarships. The PTA raised over $50,000 at their annual dance-a-thon. These proceeds will be utilized to support various initiatives such as field trips, building projects, and other events focused around our students. Next, we have safety initiatives. All schools continue to participate in regular safety drills such as the fire drills, tornado drills, active response, and an active shooter. Teachers take place in CPR and CPI training to make our classrooms safer. And finally, each school has established partnerships with the fire department to ensure fire safety. Next, I decided to add a little student's perspective from this report, as I am fortunate enough to have a little sister who's in the 5th grade. So I asked her some questions. So I really asked her, what are the positives and negatives you see in your school each day? And I'll tell you first, the positives outweigh the negatives significantly. She's a big fan of the diverse after-school clubs, specifically the Taylor Swift Club and Runners Club, which she thinks offers students a good time to express themselves and to meet people with similar interests as them. Next, we have the positive social interaction, as recess and lunch are her favorite periods of the day. Imagine that. But she likes being able to sit with her friends and really have that good social interaction that you might not get inside the classroom. One of the big things she highlighted was actually the transition from 4th to 5th grade, as the independence increases greatly because you can sit with your friends at lunch and kids actually walk out to the buses unaccompanied by an adult, which she liked, a little bit of independence there. And then finally, how efficient our bus arrival and dismissal is here on this campus, as the kids know where to go to their slot and the buses are able to arrive and depart very smoothly and very safely. Some areas we could improve upon. She says that as a 5th grader, they are only offered general music. She wishes that maybe she could explore playing an instrument or singing in the choir. So there's one thing. And then the library access. Obviously, we have this amazing media center here, and she was a little bit disappointed that they only get to go once every 2 weeks as a class. So maybe that could be something we take a look at. But all in all, as members of the board, our decisions have a direct impact on the educational experiences of the students in our buildings. While there are areas for improvement, it is very important to note that the positives significantly outweigh the negatives at our schools. And I think that this is just a testament to our dedication in enhancing our students' everyday lives. Thank you.
Thanks, CJ. In the changeover between students here, I will note that on November 9th, we have an opportunity as board members, if you're interested, I believe you got emails about it, staff appreciation lunch. So not only are the students served lunch that day, but the staff is served a lunch as well. And I'm going to help serve lunch at LES. That's where my youngest grandson in Loveland Schools is. He'll be thrilled to see me at the lunch counter. I will let you know that you need to wear a hairnet or a net,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert, just to let you know if you decide to volunteer. So I think
They
you
weren't
had.
as worried about the hairnet for me. I don't know.
Anyway, I just thought I'd note that since we heard that lunch is such a great time. So yeah, thanks.
All right, I have the LIS and LMS reports. So I'll start with some of the recent building activities. We'll start with Homecoming Spirit Week, which was a while back, but there were great dress up days all week, and then finished with the parade, which is a great opportunity. Lots of the younger students are able to participate in that. There were family teacher conferences on October 5th and 10th, and using the Aubrey mental health check-in tool, we have started doing student check-ins this mid-September, and they will occur every Tuesday and will run all year. I know from personal experience, these also are in place at the high school. Everyone uses Aubrey to access their grades, their classes, their information, etc. And this is just a chance to respond if you might need any assistance and get the help you need subsequently. Staff and student training, safety training occurred. At LMS, there was a rapid release drill and bus evacuation drill, so our students are prepared for challenging situations. And then for the 1013 and 1016 district in-service days, LMS students spent time focusing on areas of mental health, personalized learning, the use of artificial intelligence in the classroom, gifted training, CPR and CPI training, and planning for the second quarter. I have some upcoming events. We have October 17th, the LMS Orchestra Concert, October 20th, the Walk for Water at LAS. November 2nd and November 4th, LMS is doing the Addams Family production. November 6th is the LMS Choir Concert. November 8th and 9th, Conference Nights, and November 14th is the band concert. I'll also add from the student representative side, we were able to have a meeting with Mr. Broadwater a couple weeks ago, just us, and I thought it was very productive. We were able to talk about some initiatives that might be going in place going forward, potentially meeting some of the principals and buildings and students, doing a little bit more outreach personally, instead of just getting these reports secondhand sometimes. And so a lot of cool initiatives and ideas going forward. Mr. Broadwater even hinted at a potential internship happening at the board office. So we'll see what happens, but I'm sure we'll have more to report going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can tell Mr. Broadwater that you guys can handle his report. So.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I am the high school Board of Education student representative. And on Wednesday, October 11th, the high school engaged in Exploration Wednesday, which is an important day for my fellow students and I. The freshmen had an incredible opportunity to shadow a professional in the career field that they are interested in. Sophomores and juniors were taking the PSAT, Practice ACT, or ASVAB. The seniors got to give back to their community and volunteer for one of the several charitable organizations participating. This day took lots of planning and effort from our staff, so a massive thank you to all of those who helped out. And even more exciting news, Loveland High School is currently in the AP honor roll, earning a silver designation. 62% of LHS seniors have experienced at least one AP course prior to graduating. In similar news, the quarter has ended. Congratulations on an amazing first quarter. So for the best part of this report, congratulations to our wonderful marching band for blowing the competition away, quite literally. Congratulations to you, Aaron, at the Dawson Bryant Invitational. They were awarded first in auxiliary, percussion, and band, which made them take home a grand champion trophy and qualify for state. Loveland High School also has several amazing ways to be involved, which was proudly displayed during the club fair last week. There were several great clubs for all students to join. I personally am excited for Women in Business and Tigers in Service. These clubs are truly what make LHS an incredible place to be. Students cultivate remarkable relationships with people who have similar interests or aspirations. Whether you're looking to volunteer or meet new friends, LHS has a club for all students. In summary, we had an amazing quarter and look forward to starting the next. Congratulations to all of our staff and students for being so dedicated and supportive for our first quarter.
I did not. So thank you to you three. Great reports. They were really very interesting, very well done. And as I normally say, if you need to leave to go do homework, you are welcome to leave at any time. We'd love to have you stay for as much as the meeting you'd like to, but if you do need to take off, that's fine too. I believe that Reverend Eilert had something. Do you want to highlight what you just asked me if I had mentioned?
Just want to make sure that everyone knew, as you hear all these wonderful things happening in our buildings, the Loveland Showcase is happening next week at the high school on Wednesday night.
The 25th.
It's always a great night to come out and see all kinds of kids doing amazing things, see our staff as well, the way that they pour into our kids. It's always a very uplifting experience. So encourage the whole community to come out and be a part of that.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. While Reverend Eilert has the floor, I apologize for not asking at the end of my report if there was anything to come from other board members. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No,
this evening?
Eileen has everything else. to
I have
share.
nothing. I
Oh.
just wanted to say that.
He's got it.
Anyway.
All right, guys.
Yeah, I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Okay, so we'll go to Mrs. Washburn and then anybody else who has anything. Go ahead,
Okay.
Eileen.
I have a lot to say. So at the state level for, as the student achievement representative, the information that we've been asked to disseminate is that October is Dyslexia Awareness Month with a focus on screening, intervention, and remediation. October is also School Safety Month, and then also schools are asked to really put an emphasis on the fact that Medicaid eligibility has changed, and the reason that's important to schools is because we have liaisons who can help our families that are in need with being aware of the fact that that's changed and that they can apply and we can give them assistance in that application process if needed. So that's all from the state level that I have. We also had a business advisory meeting this month, which was quite impressive. It's really grown drastically in the years. And the showing this year was tremendous, and that's run by Drews, Stacy, and Lynette. The number of businesses that stepped up and stepped forward to be part of the Business Advisory Council was impressive. We're just really expanding on the shadowing opportunities, internship opportunities, and steps to help with the Ohio Readiness Career Seals. So lots of opportunities coming in the very near future. Like I said, lots of local businesses and some pretty unique and cool experiences that our students will have.
And that plan is on the agenda for approval this evening. So the Business Advisory Council plan.
Yeah,
So,
but it was just cool to see how
No,
many
no, I'm-
people in the community.
I'm glad of
came
the report. I
forward
just
to-
was
Yeah, no, I
noting
know.
it.
I'm just saying it was awesome. All different areas to work in. You threw off my rhythm. So what else? Oh, and then tonight we had a student achievement committee meeting, which aligns with what the state asked us to share about our staff and dyslexia training, which is required per the state. The buildings and the district has also done a phenomenal job as far as school safety and moving forward with that and training and really just upping the game. I don't want to share specifics there for obvious reasons to keep our students and staff safe. We won't get into the details of that, but the plan and the training has been pretty cumbersome and goes above and beyond. I know I feel safe having children in the district hearing it. Hold on, I'm gonna pull up my notes. I have a whole bunch of notes. Next month, we will hear a report about the report card data. We'll have a presentation on that. Talked a lot about the science of reading, which is coming from the state level in regards to what that looks like, where funding will come from, what the ratio is, just the full picture of that. And we'll have more information as we receive it from the state. And then, oh, I think I covered it all. What else? Anything?
The couple of new pieces of legislation that will require.
Oh, yes. Yes, so Aaron's Law and House Bill 123, which information will be sent out to parents in regards to both of those, but it's required coming from the state level, suicide prevention, and yes, I was pulling it up to see what verbiage they used. So that is information that, when did we say March? Is that when it was? Yeah, in March, that will be rolled out within the at the building level. Anything else? It's been a busy month.
Ms. Cecil, I'm fine for now.
We had a facilities committee meeting kind of wrapped into a finance committee meeting. John and Rob were both there. And there is really only one item which is on our agenda, so we'll cover later. From a finance committee standpoint, we had discussion about excess funds and investments and interest rates being at, near-term historic highs. And so how do we maximize the income to the district? And I know that Rob has comments on that as well. So I don't think I have a whole lot to add. And I don't want to put too much on your plate. I know that you have other things to talk about.
All right, thanks. Anything else? Any questions? Then we will move to that item that was just referenced. I see Mr. Ames back there. We have the actual first item on, the first resolution on the agenda is a resolution rejecting bids. So I'm going to ask that we have a motion and a second to put this resolution on the table, and then we'll have Mr. Ames report to us.
So moved.
So I hear Reverend Eilert and
Second.
Dr. Swetchnow moving and seconding. Mr. Ames, can you give us some background on this resolution?
Yes, this is for a project, excuse me, to install cameras throughout the district. It is a state grant that we received. And when we went out in early October for bid, we had 8 people coming to look at the job. However, when the bids came in, we only had 3 people come in. We expected the job to be around $335,000. One company came in at $331, the second came in at $333, and the third was at $365. Upon checking references and some of the documentation, I found that the low bid had not had certification for the software program that was required. They went ahead and got the software certification that night when I told them about it, but that doesn't give me a lot of confidence that they knew what they were doing for a large project like this. And also they have not had any experience with schools since 2020. So they've not, and it's only one school. So left me a little bit concerned. So at that point in time, I decided to rebid the whole project. Going through the bids even closer today, I found that the second number 2 bidder made a mistake in their math, and they would have been underpriced by $5,000, but it was a adding error on their part. So we will rebid the entire project. I hope to have it in by November 3rd, so it will be ready for you to approve on the November 14th board meeting. So we are just
With greater
rejecting.
clarity about the specifications.
I'm sorry. Oh, yes, I'm going to tighten down the specifications. It's something that I've never had to deal with this level of specificity. So we're going to tighten it up so everybody knows exactly what we expect.
Can you just comment on the fact that there is eight people who picked up packets or had initial interest, but there was only 3, final bids?
Yeah.
I know that we do as much as we can to make sure that we're casting our net as wide as possible. Do you have any idea what happened with that?
Yeah, a lot of companies technology companies, they go for larger margin projects. School districts, and when it's a public bid, it is not a very high margin job. So when they come in and they see it and they see how much cabling there's going to be required, how much work is going to be required in 6 different buildings, they oftentimes will back away, say we don't have the personnel, or we really just don't want to get involved in this. So it ends up just being companies that deal with school bids all the time because they know it, it's their business, their industry. And quite often it will happen even in plumbing and other types of jobs. It sounds like a good job until they come in and say, ooh, it's an old building or something such as that. So they try to stay in their niche, which is usually not schools.
And just to go back, it sounds like with the rebidding process, you'll probably only end up with a lesser amount of interest even to start with. Are you recontacting the people who had expressed initial interest and maybe a change in specifications changes
Yes.
their interest?
It's going to make it even tighter specification for a lot of them, but we will send it back to all of those that expressed interest originally, including the 3 that actually did bid. I would imagine the one that came in at 365 is going to say, I can't get down to the 335 expectation. So I would like to see more. But again, there's very few people that like to get into this market.
Well, and I know you know your business with this much better than any of us in this room for sure, and way better than me. Is there any value to contacting other schools about people that they've had success with to make sure they're included in the?
Yes, and some schools have gone through the unified bid system. For this project, it's a very labor-intensive project. So I decided to do the non-unified bid process. I actually sent out an email to all of the other business managers in the Tri-County area, asking them who they've gone with recently. So for the most part, it's the same 2 or 3 people that we use.
Just to be clear, generally when we accept a bid, what we are accepting is saying that we are accepting the lowest responsible bid. And when we're not accepting bids, we need a resolution to reject the bids. And you've given us the reasoning behind the rejection. So it's simply a resolution that's needed to reject the bids that we received and go out for bid again.
And if I could, by refusing these bids, the state is very, very specific on how you can reject or disqualify a bid. And if I were to disqualify them on something like certification, they would be able to file an injunction against the project and keep the project from going ahead for months and months. Would they do it? Who knows, but it's not worth it for us to take that chance and to be painted as having an injunction filed against us for not following the correct processes. So I just feel it's better to do it this way, that we have done to the letter of the law what we're supposed to do.
Anything else?
Is there any advantage to splitting it across part by schools?
That's against the law.
Okay.
You can't break up a project to try to slide it in, because 50,000 is what I am able to spend without formal bidding. And every once in a while, somebody will say, well, why don't you just break it up into little $49,000 projects? And auditors don't like that. They would be after me in a heartbeat. So
Is there any ability to combine that with the HVAC control project?
no, completely different animals.
I'm just thinking pulling cables at the same time.
Yeah, they different kinds of cables. The HVAC guys pull a 2-strand wire that daisy chains everything in the building together, and the technology guys pull a Cat5 wire, which goes just from one spot to the other spot. They don't interact, and it's a different craft altogether.
Okay.
Is it also governed by the grant that we've received, how we can bid this?
Some school districts have not bid it because technology items are not required to be bid by the state law. That permits you to get consistent equipment across years over years. And this could have gone that way. But there's so much cabling involved that I didn't feel like it was the right thing to do, not going out for the public bid.
All right, anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Member Nyler,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetznow,
Yes.
Ms. Cecil,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes,
Mrs. Washburn.
motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Ames. We then move into the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources recommendations. Because there are 3 of those, I'm going to suggest that we hear a report from Mr. Collier first. We usually do one motion, but because we're going to do it in 3 parts, how about if we have him report first and then we'll do the motions?
Okay, that sounds great. Good evening, everybody. I'm Garth Collier. As Dr. Lorenz just said, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. It's good to see you tonight. She also just mentioned that there are 3 sections. Really, there are 2 things that are typically that are in one. I'll explain the difference on why there's a part 2 for that. And then something that is separate from the regular piece is that there is going to be the Supplemental Review Committee has a supplemental that they would like to add. The recommendation from Mr. Broadwater and myself from that committee is to add a supplemental. You will see in board docs, and board members, you have seen this in the admin section, but it's also in the public section as well, of adding an additional coach, which is at the middle school for a B basketball team. And I also listed out kind of like what the Supplemental Review Committee is, how it works, and all of the details for that particular position Those are all in board docs for you to see. Couple of things to note in part 1 of the HR agenda. There are some things that are noted in yellow. Those pieces that are highlighted in yellow are pieces that came after it first went live on Friday. That's why I sent you guys an additional message, making sure that you were aware that there were some items that were on later. And then if you take a look, I'm going to take this opportunity to make sure that we all are happy and know that if you look down at section F, employment of classified staff, section 2, yes, it is true that there is a bus driver, even though it is a part-time 15 hours a week. We were successful in having a bus driver join our team. So hip, hip, hooray for that. If any of you who haven't been here before and you would like to drive a bus, please call me. I would gladly sit down with you and talk to you about the ins and outs of that and the certifications that are required for that. So just wanted to make sure to point that out because we have had multiple years with not being able to attract any bus drivers. We keep losing drivers, which is a not just Cincinnati thing for schools, not just Ohio, but it's across the country. But we will gladly take that bus driver. He's doing great. So anyway.
I just wanted to let you know that my 16-year-old grandson passed his driver's test today. And while he was there, his mother asked him if he was signing up for the CDL test. So I said, okay, there's another bus driver. So
That's funny.
So what is the magic number now to restore high school busing?
Oh, to restore high school busing, that would make us go from our tier package that we have. We're talking probably anywhere between 12 and 15 full-time drivers for us to be able to do that. We are in a situation right now with even not having high school busing. So we're talking about busing for, LECC up through middle school, that we have one sub driver that we have. Our transportation director and the assistant sometimes have to drive routes. And there are, coming up in winter, there tends to be more sickness. And we are worried and concerned about not having to double up routes for what we've got, let alone adding 12 or 15 folks to be able to tackle something like adding the high school busing back. To be honest, I would love for that to be the case. It's just not in the cards right now. And like I said, other districts across the country are in the same boat that we're in. But I'm glad that, we were able to have a 15-hour-a-week driver join us. And we're going to continue to publicize, put information out there. If you guys notice that there is a district newsletter that gets sent out every month for you parents, there's one every week that comes. And at the very bottom of that, you will see there's a transportation section on every one of those communications. So we are trying. And I'm glad. I've been up here for multiple years without a bus driver on here. So I'm going to continue to be happy about the 15 hours that we got.
You had them just in the retirement section.
Yes, lots of action with bus drivers, but it's always up top for retirement. That's true.
And Garth, just to reiterate, and I know that you've talked about this and we've already started to share it with parents, to my knowledge, how close are we to having problems with not being able to get all the kids to school that we currently get to school?
We are, it's a day-to-day kind of thing. If we, in my opinion, if we can keep our folks that drive buses, if we can stay away from like a leave of absence kind of position or somebody having more of a long-term illness, I think we're going to be able to get through with minimal amounts. It's just, the past history has told me that the winter months, there are much more absences. And when folks are getting sick, maybe have the flu, those kinds of things. And if they're going to be out multiple days, or if we have anybody who, slips on the ice and has to have a knee surgery or something like that, if those things pop up, that's where I'm going to get concerned. I think that there is a high possibility that we have a small portion of routes that might have to get doubled. But I think it's a high possibility that we're going to have to double routes at some point. It's just going to be for a small group of folks.
Well, and I just bring it up because statistically, it seems likely this winter that will happen, just looking at the number of bus drivers that we have. And I'm pretty sure that I understand communication has already started to go out with families. There's nothing more disruptive than at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're told
Correct.
nobody's going to take your kid to school today. do you have can you just review the process if we get to that spot?
Yeah, so the first strategy that we're going to use would be that we would be quote double routing. And what that would mean is that we would be taking neighborhoods that are close to the school for that particular school. So let's take intermediate middle school and let's take Pheasant Hills and Claiborne, the neighborhoods that are right here. Something to do would be that we would be communicating that the bus pickup time is either going to be earlier or later, and one route, somebody that typically does Pheasant Hills, maybe they're going to go do the Pheasant Hills route first, and then the Claiborne route is the one that's uncovered, and they will come and drop students off here on this campus. They'd be monitored in the cafeteria like earlier than usual. And then that bus, after they drop, would go back out and do another route instead of just doing one route that they typically do. That would be kind of like doubling up a route. And then what some other districts have done, it's kind of been like a rolling blackout of which routes there's just not going to be any transportation for that day. We want to try to avoid that as much as we can and try to double route, but it could eventually get to maybe a rolling blackout.
Well, and I also know that we've recently improved our outreach and our system for making sure that parents are informed. Just a reiteration to make sure that that's as up to date as possible, because there's nothing worse than a kid standing out waiting for a bus that's never going to come.
No, I know. And Greg Ossie, who's the transportation director, Mr. Ames is in constant communication with Greg in terms of if it's looking like, let's say that there are some absences that we know that are sick days that are coming up and it's not the morning of, and it's looking like, oh my gosh, next week on Thursday, we already have 3 drivers out. If there are a couple more who call in, what are we going to do? So we can try to pre-plan for that and pre-communicate to families as best we can. The worst case scenario is what you mentioned, which is multiple folks calling off at 4:30 a.m. and then the communication will be happening in between that 4:30 a.m. and before, let's say, the 6:50 a.m. bus pickup. So we try to avoid that as much as we can.
Have we thought about some other strategies? Like, I'm just thinking about, we've got the showcase coming up next week, to have some kind of active recruiting times where we've got someone available if people have any interest to talk to someone about what would this career look like for them? How might they?
Yeah, we have. We've had some, at the beginning of the year where parents are always coming into the buildings for like a parent information night and those kind of things. We are constantly talking about, hey, how can we get the word out? Typically, the folks who are coming to the showcase event are most likely folks that are our parents. We'd love just any community member to come as well. But the tradition with that is that there hasn't been a whole lot of community members show up to that event. It's mostly our parents, and we've already been hitting our parents with that information. But yeah, we talk about it. We have a Tuesday admin meeting every week, and Andrew has been really good about, Mr. Setters has been really good about, probing Mr. Ames and myself, like, hey, what else can we do? What other information can I get out there? Can we set up a table here? What can we do? So those things are constantly brought up, and we try to staff those things as best possible, but it's an uphill battle for sure, I'll tell you.
Is there any penalty from the state if we go to a rolling blackout situation?
There isn't. John, did you hear her question? Her question was, is there any penalty if we go to a rolling blackout? It has to do with the number of times that happens throughout the year. And I don't remember the number offhand, but I believe it's something like if there's more than 10 times that you have to do that, then there is some sort of a penalty. So there is some restrictions that happen. Again, we haven't triggered into us having to do our quote, like first one of those, but we may have to. Did you hear a question?
Yeah. The city of Cincinnati was penalized, I think it was just last year, almost $2 million for skipping a specific route more than 5 days, I believe it was. And they are still fighting that. And it seems as though the state has kind of backed off of that, but it's still in place. They could do it if they so choose. But I think Cincinnati's was a result of that fiasco that they had with going from their metro buses. And they were not ready for the start of the year. But we have checked with all the other districts around us and nobody has been penalized yet. So they can, but they have not.
Just for like reference, I know like Lakota Local Schools has had, they're the ones who I hear from the most where they have this rolling blackout. And they haven't told us of that the state has come in and actually applied the penalty yet, but it kind of lingers there that possibly that's something that could happen. Something else that we would really want to try to avoid, but maybe in future years it would happen, is there really the only other thing that you can do is have kind of like a radius for each school. And if folks are close enough to quote walk to school, that there wouldn't be transportation provided. Again, we would want to keep those type of things as a last resort type. Just kudos to our current bus drivers who are doing the best they can to make sure if they have appointments to do them after work hours and those kinds of things. Everybody chips in to make sure that we're trying to do the best we can.
That's actually called a 2-mile walkout. There's a 1-mile walkout and a 2-mile walkout. That plays very well with neighborhood schools, communities that have neighborhood schools. For us, it just doesn't supply any significant benefit. LECC, well, we're not going to have kindergartners walk. So the rest of the schools, it's just such a small area. It really would provide us very little benefit. And we've mapped it out. We've got the drawings and everything. So we've looked at it. If we were neighborhood schools, life would be good. But we're not.
Couple of other
Life is
items.
good, even though we're not neighborhood schools, Mr. Ames, but
I will tell you that there are lots of other advantages to grade band schools, which is what we have. And if we had lots of time, I could talk to you about lots of advantages for that, especially with staffing that we have that some other districts that have neighborhood schools are not able to have. There was a section 2 or a part 2 because Reverend Eilert has a family member that is recommended for a supplemental position. And so for him to be able to vote on this section with a yes or a no, and then to abstain for the next section is why it is separated out. And then I already mentioned the B basketball piece. And then the only other thing that I would like to bring up is, I think of course, the board members know, and for a lot of the audience members, you know that the FTE chart is something that I've been attaching to in my section for the board report for a long time now. We have been asked, I was asked, and I'm fine with providing a quote enrollment number for each month that's there. So on the FTE chart that you will see that is in board docs right now in the bottom left-hand corner, there is an explanation for what the enrollment is for October. And I do want to take a couple of minutes, I'll try to be brief, to try to make sure that everyone is aware, because you can see different enrollment numbers on different reports from the state. And I want to make sure that I'm pretty clear about the numbers that I'm reporting in the FTE chart. So if you look at that chart.
Garth, I'm sorry, can you just reiterate one more time for people,
Yes.
like where they would find that on the board docs page?
Okay, for this
Or if they went to
particular
Loveland
meeting,
Schools.
it would be in the public section and then under the HR section. So like for the agenda for today, the HR section is section 5. And then you can see there's a 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. For today's purpose, and for almost always the purpose, there's typically only like a 5.1. And that's where the FTE chart is for this month and typically always is.
and it's labeled the FTE count ongoing.
That's
That's
correct.
the title of the report.
Yes.
And if people so chose to look back 4 months or 6 months or 8 months, they can find it in board docs by going to that specific meeting and looking.
You can, however, I also, the FTE chart kind of like for this particular school year, it'll have what the FTE number is for each one of those sections, and it stays in for the next month. So there is a historic view by just viewing this one. But if you want a more specific view, or if you wanted to know when there might have been a change, you can go back to future or earlier times to see that. Good point. Okay, so enrollment. I want everybody to know that our EMIS specialist, that our enrollment gets constantly updated with the state all the time. It's a report that her name is Tana. Tana produces that student FTE report lots of times, sometimes multiple times a month, sometimes it might only be one time a month. And that report is that is the information that gets sent, and it generates two different numbers. One is a total student number, and that's a number that is all of our students, no matter if they're attending at Loveland, maybe they're a Loveland student, but they attend Great Oaks. Maybe they're a kindergartner, but they're only a half-day kindergartner. So in this particular area, they're counted as a full student because it's just how many kids. That number is different than the other number that gets generated, which is the other number that I have listed here. And that is the number that is the quote funded students, and that's the number of students that we get funding for. Those type of things that I just mentioned, like a student that attends the Oaks, instead of being counted as a 1 in the first number, they're now a 0 for us in the second number. And there'll be a caveat to that here in a minute, and I'll get to it. A half-day kindergarten kid is counted as 0.5 instead of a whole, so on and so forth. Our students at the high school that take CCP courses, if each one of those, each period is about 14% of the student's day. Let's say there's a student who takes 2 different CCP courses, then roughly 14% times 2.
College Credit Plus.
College Credit Plus, thank you. And those are classes that could be taught by a Loveland teacher, but they also could be taught by a local university. And our high school students have access to those programs. 14% of each one of those classes would get deducted. So you can see why the two numbers are different. Does that make sense to everybody? The number that is most closely related to what you would see on any kind of report from the state would be the second number. That's the number that we're getting funding for, okay? People will consider and call that number an ADM, average daily membership. I will caution you that that number that gets sent, Tana generates the report, the number gets populated, that's our Loveland number, but when it goes to the state, depending upon what report it is, an ADM changes, which is where it gets confusing. Confusing enough for Rob to say, I can't do that, right? So here's the thing. If you go to, let's say, the CUP report, which is a report that you can go to the state of Ohio's website, you can pull that report for any district in Ohio. When you pull our report for a particular year, it'll give you an ADM. It then has a paragraph on how they calculate ADM for that report. It is not the number that gets generated when we submit it, but they do things to that number and manipulate it for the report purpose. There's nothing shady about it, but I'll give you an example. Let's go back to the Oaks example. The very first number that gets generated, the Loveland student gets counted as 1. And the funded number, it gets counted as 0 for us. The ADM number for the CUP report gives 20% or 0.2 for every one of those kids for their ADM. So right off the bat, let's say we had 100 kids at the Oaks. First number, we're going to have all 100. The second one, we're going to have a 0. The state would report on the CUP report that we have 20, but we get credit for 20 because each one of them are 0.2. So you can see where this can get confusing. What I would want everybody to know is just simply, if you want to compare one number to the other, just always use the same report. So if you want to look at enrollment and you want to look at the CUP report, sounds great, but look at CUP versus CUP. If you want to look at ADM from the school, that's fine. When you use my FTE chart for it, use the funded column versus funded column, and then it loses some of the discrepancy. Please nod if it makes a little bit of sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
And in addition to that, what used to happen to the schools was we got an ADM number on, I think it was October 10th, but it was a date where we got an ADM, and that was the number that we kept. Now we have an ADM every day that could be different.
That's correct. So that ADM, that October count month, is not necessarily kind of like a thing anymore. It constantly gets reported, and then the state takes all of those reports that have been submitted and they come up with their number, not just that particular number in October. The other thing to keep in mind, folks, is that the most important thing I would say is just if you're going to use Cup Report, then keep using Cup Report. Doesn't matter. If you want to look at, well, has Loveland been increasing or decreasing in enrollment, those type of things. The other thing to keep in mind is even other state information about enrollment, for example, the state report card. If you look at enrollment for the state report card versus the Cup Report, those two numbers are not the same numbers either. And both of them get generated from the number that we submit, but the number doesn't match the Cup Report number, and the state report card number for enrollment don't match either. So if you want to use the report card, sounds great, but compare report card to report card, cup to cup, our number that we produce versus our number we produce. Sound good?
And
Not complicated
That
at all.
sounds super clear and very simple. But other than that, in general, what's the delta between the lowest number and the highest number? Like I look at our funded students at 3975 and our total students at 4353. And I think of us as having 4,300 students, give or take.
Yep.
You'll see about a 400 student difference.
Yes, but that also depends on our course offerings, let's say at the high school. Our courses that are CCP courses, maybe we have, the teachers have to have a certain certification to be able to do that, right? And let's say that there is a teacher that retired that used to have a couple of courses that they taught were CCP, and then that person retired, and then the person that is kind of teaching those classes now doesn't have that. There could be from year to year a change in how many kids can access a class like that. But also it could be the flip side of that. We could have a teacher who's taught the same course for a number of years. They now have the certification, so now it can count for CCP credit where it didn't the year before. Something else to bring up, and I'm not trying to muddy the water, is that let's take a CCP course. Some of those courses are semester courses. So when you look at the report that I'm going to put for the number of students for that FTE funded, October 1st is the one that I put here. So the report that she ran for me on October 1st, that's where I got the number from, and that's what's on the October business meeting document. That's during the first quarter and during the first semester. There's a lot of students who might take 3 CCP courses in the first semester and only 1 in the second semester. So when you take a look at that FTE column for students, that student is going to be counted at a certain percent for half the year, and then their schedule changed. So they get changed. Tana has to go in and change those. So we have a different number. So even throughout the year with the same student, it can change. So it's always fluid.
So, I mean, there's 2 things I would say. The first one would be, so it's very obvious from hearing you say this, that you can't take the CUP report, for instance, and compare that to the self-reported Loveland number of students and expect them to be the same.
Oh, for sure, no.
And then the second thing is, what would you suggest to a board member if they asked, how many students do we have in the Loveland School District?
So to me, there are 2 ways.
Asking for a break.
There are 2 ways that I feel like are the best ways. The first way would be looking, now that we're going to put that number on the FTE chart, that is the number, right? So that total number of students number, and then the FTE number, which is the percent that we get funded for, those are the numbers, right? Another question that you would probably have to ask a more specific question and say something like, well, how many students are in 5th grade, but only at LIS? Because there could be students who's a 5th grader who they're at a separate placement at a different facility. That student isn't sitting in our school, but we do receive funding for them, but they might go someplace else, especially if they have a disability. So there are lots of things that could make that confusing. But if somebody just really wanted to know from year to year, I think using any of them, report card, CUP report, or our number is fine to answer the question like, well, how many kids are really like in 5th grade? I can answer that question on a daily basis, but it would just be the kids that are actually here. Not a foster placement that's out of district, but it's still our student. Not a student who might be on an autism scholarship, not a student who's at a separate placement. Not calculating that if it's a middle school grade that we're talking about, and there is an Oaks teacher that teaches at the middle school. So when that seventh grader takes that course, 14% for the funded piece comes off, but I wouldn't be having that in there. I would count that seventh grade kid, even though they're taking that course as a kid. I would say, this is how many kids we have in the middle school, if that makes sense. But trying to compare that number to another report from the state is a very difficult and messy way to do it. And I would just encourage people, now that we're putting it here, that's a really great place to see it and to see changes in enrollment. Did I help answer that?
That was
Well-
great. Thank you.
Thank you for putting it there, because that answers the question for me. Now, the next question is, with the change in legislation where people can move their kids from school to school, are we gaining, are we gaining or losing?
Well, depends on, are we gaining and losing from what time to what time? I know that sounds silly, but to give you the right answer, you would need to tell me
From the start of school to now?
the start of school to now for the number of kids that are enrolled, we're up. For the number of kids in the FTE column, it's down because literally when the EMIS coordinator is going through and changing kid by kid, I'm talking hundreds of kids. That's why she resaves and resubmits multiple times. So the first quarter just ended. If any of the student schedules are different for second quarter, she's going to now have to go in and start making changes. So that number fluctuates a bunch. The total enrolled students for this particular year, we are actually a fuzz up from where we started the year, but we're talking nominal amount. Like it's not
Fuzz.
like, I mean, it's not like we have to add a new teacher or do anything like that. It's
So
relatively
we're pretty well
flat.
holding steady. Okay.
But that, yeah, from beginning of school year to now.
What number gets used to determine the cost per student?
I would think that it would probably come from the CUP report, but I can double check and find that
That's
answer
where I
out for
think
you.
it comes, but I just was,
Yeah.
I was curious.
I would say a lot of the comparative data that you see, most of it will be generated from the CUP report. At least that's where I go for a lot of my information when trying to do, like, compare one district to another. That's a piece. And I know I gave you guys a lot of information about it. If any of you want to talk to me and or possibly, the EMIS coordinator could also help me answer some of these questions. If you have questions for me, I would gladly sit down with you. If a community member has a question, I'd be glad to sit down and talk with them. There isn't anything to hide. It's just depending upon where you look for the information, you get a different number, and then that can make people think that hey, that's wrong, or they're reporting it wrong. It isn't anything like that. It's just enrollment is a really tricky thing. And again, if you want to start with CUP, stick with CUP. Start with report cards, stick with report card, and that gives you your best comparison.
I'll hit you one more time. In the past, we've talked about this October date as being probably the most accurate for our purposes of knowing, how many kids are here in the district overall. Is that still a valid time to look if you're looking at year over year trends?
It is. October is a good time because at the very beginning of the year, there might be kids who are still Loveland kids, and the parent has thought in their head that they are, quote, withdrawn, but they haven't started their new school yet, and we haven't got a request for that student's records yet. So there's a system that goes into play at the very beginning of the year. So August and September is a really bad time to get the information. Usually those things are kind of all settled out, which is why the state, I believe, which is not now, but in the past has said, okay, well, let's take that October count, and that should be pretty reflective of the year. I think October, November is a really good kind of like gauge for after the beginning of the year information gets kind of like sifted out. Yep.
All right, Mr. Collier, it's Mr. Giuffre who's supposed to have all the numbers, not your report.
And seriously, guys, this is something that anytime somebody asks me a question or whatever, I I try to give them the most, the answer that gives them the most information, because I'm not trying to mislead anybody. But I'm telling you, enrollment is tricky. And it depends on your definition and what time at which you're asking and all those kinds of things. I would just say, if you have a question, reach out and I'd be glad to give you the info as best I can at that time, but just know that the information changes, which sometimes we don't have any control over. So, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I think I've given enough information. I didn't cover the B basketball thing a lot. It's, you guys, it was in the information. If you guys have any questions about that, I'd be
Very
glad.
thorough explanation.
Oh, thank you. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be glad to answer them right now too.
Well, we'll try the resolutions and I'll
Okay.
start with making a motion to approve the resolutions of the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, including resignations and employment, certified classified homebound substitute and supplemental positions for the 23-24 school year in part one of those. So I'll make that motion.
Second.
And Ms. Cecil,
Yes.
seconded. Any questions about that agenda item? All right, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that one?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Cecil,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer,
Yes.
Ms. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. We now need a motion for part two, which is the employment of a supplemental position for the 23-24 school year. Is there a motion?
Second.
Mrs. Washburn and Ms. Cecil made that motion. Any questions on that one? Mr. Giuffre?
Ms. Washburn,
Yes.
Ms. Cecil,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Abstain.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
and Dr. Schweitzer.
Yes.
Motion carried. And the final one is a resolution to add a new supplemental position for the LEA agreement, which is the Loveland Middle School Boys Basketball Orange Team, or B Team, as
Yes.
Mr. Carlier was talking about. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Swetch now moved, and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my left ear, Mrs. Washburn. There we go. Okay, so there is a motion and a second. Any additional questions about that?
Do we know how much of the position is going to be paid by the booster?
Yes. Well, not from the boosters, but the.
Student fees.
Yeah, the student fee is the 265. I put down in my calculation that there's most likely going to be 12 students. That comes to 3,180. I did this earlier today because I thought I might get the question. So that's 3,180, I believe, if you take 265 times 12, if I'm remembering that correctly. And the coaching position is for a little over $4,700. It's a tier 4. So it's offsets it by roughly 3/4 of the money that it's going to cost to have that coach for that team is going to be offset by the parents paying the fee.
And just to be clear, are those fees also used for things like tournament entries or any other associated
No, you might think
uniforms,
that.
cleaning services, busing,
So
first class coaching?
I asked
level?
Mr. Bruce that. I said, hey, I think I might get asked this question. And I said, hey, tell me about like officials, right? So if there's going to be another team and you have to pay another set of officials, and he said, no, that money actually comes out of my budget that I already have. Oops, sorry. So that isn't going to be impacted. But I would probably say that the money that comes in for the players who are paying, I think eventually it's going to go into a pot of money that Mr. Bruce might be getting his budget from, but it's not a direct one-to-one link, if that makes sense.
Anything else? All right, then we need to vote on that one.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Cecil,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. Sorry, you caught me there for a minute because you usually do who moves in seconds first, and you threw me off my rhythm there, but that's fine.
I appreciate your time and sorry I took so long tonight.
That's all right. Next time,
I'll make
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
you're
That
right.
was,
I
that was a great report. Thank you. It's really good to
I
know
marked it in the
all
wrong
of those
spot.
things.
Okay, okay. I see what you're saying.
All right.
I'll fix that.
Very good. Now that we have Mr. Giuffre completely confused, we're going to move to the treasurer's section. And there are 3 items under there, which we will consider all separately. But I will first ask Mr. Giuffre, I know he has at least one report for us. What is your preference, Mr. Giuffre? Would you like us to do the items under your report first
I
and
think,
then go to your report?
yeah, since we've got some momentum, that would be lovely. And then I'll give the rest of the report after that.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we'll answer Ms. Cecil's question at the end of that report. So the first item under the treasurer's report is to accept the financial reports and approve investments for September 2023. So there, and I'll make that motion. There are reports attached in board docs. There is also a listing of the investments. So board members should remember that we are accepting the financial reports and approving the investments. So I moved. Is there a second? Mrs. Washburn seconded. So on that one, questions about any of the reports or the investments? I don't see any questions. Mr. Giuffre, have anything to
Thank
tell
you.
us?
I'll try to be brief on this since I've got a full-blown budgetary and forecast report out. So we met with JB Ward, who's our relationship manager at Fifth Third, and he gave us a status of the market, and we talked about the positions in the portfolio, and part of the issue with these investments, and I'll just I think I've got this pulled up to be able to tell you that the most important part of our investments, number 1 is we want liquidity. Number 2, we want safety. Number 3, we want income. So when you invest, and we're bound by Ohio Revised Code with regards to what we are permitted to invest in and how much we're able to invest in. But it's like the deck of an aircraft carrier. If you purchase something and the ship is low in the water, when it comes up and you try to sell it and buy something else, the yield is what matters, not the rate of interest, because the yield should be, it's a very efficient market. And JB was sharing that with us, what we decided to, and so if you have a position that's low and you try to reinvestment, the only strategy that really works is to go out longer, and you have to have enough time at that interest rate to get back the difference of those yields. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it works. What we're going to do is we're going to reconnoiter in December after we have our forecast, so we have our cash flow, and at that time evaluate those positions that we believe would be able to provide that much of a return to make up the difference in those yields. And in December, well, actually, I won't be here, but in January, I'm sure the next treasurer can go through that. The finance committee will have gone through it, and I'll draft a report so that we can see what positions that we repositioned within the portfolio. But all things considered, the rate of interest is pretty amazing. And when I first got here, I believe it was 0.5%. And then last year at this time, I believe it was 3%. And at the end of September, it was 5.5%. So
what you're saying is the three items that are on the investments here are sort of normal business operating, but there will be reconsideration of other positions in the future.
that's a good
Is that
point.
correct?
I should mention we have a ladder, and so we are able to go out 60 months, 5 years. And we try to have a ladder that represents the cash flow needs of the district. Number 1, priority liquidity. And with that, when a position matures, we take that matured position and we put it out where it makes sense in the portfolio. And so with that, these positions, obviously, we're selling them at a, I mean, they're maturing with a much lower interest rate than what we're reinvesting them. That was another discussion. We do have a couple positions that we put out there that are callable. there is a slight reinvestment risk with that. So what we're doing with these, which is a lower yield, is we're putting them out further, these CDs out further. They're not callable so that we can hold those positions until they mature. So there's that. And then the meeting that was called for yesterday was in relation to House Bill 187. House Bill 187 isn't going to impact Loveland City Schools like it would impact the district at the 20 mil floor. And so our friend Matt Nolan, who was in here, spoke very eloquently about what their association is attempting to do, which is to attempt to educate politicians that you don't want to mess with the values. The values work. The values are our confidence that our house is worth that much. And when I buy your house, it's worth this much. And through all that, it seems that it did not succeed in Columbus. In fact, one of the results of House Bill 187 is a committee upon which Matt sat, and he's probably not going to get a seat back if all things go forward, because he has a completely different philosophy than 187. And so, as he mentioned last month, he mentioned that his philosophy is that on the 1st of January of 2024, I want the value of that house to be what it's actually worth in the market. What 187 does is it takes the 3-year average, 36-month look back of what the values have been and average them together to decide how much to increase the value, which makes no sense because the house isn't worth that on January 1st, 2024. So
Again, to clarify, House Bill 187 has been passed in the House,
yes,
but it has not yet gone to the Senate.
it has not. And the Senate right now with 6 Democrats, I don't think the Senate's going to pass it as it is. There's a lot going on, and the meeting went on for an hour and 15 minutes and I left because it's not going to have, my point is it's not going to have a huge impact on Loveland City Schools.
Okay.
So that's where that is at the moment. There's still a lot going on with regards to the budget. Well, there's a lot going on in Columbus. I'll
Right.
just
Well,
say that.
I know you've got a lot or got a report on that.
Yes.
Are there any questions on the September reports that are under this item that we're working on right now?
I just want to reiterate, we have $6 million right now in 1% or less.
They're
True.
in securities that at the time they were purchased were at that rate.
Okay. And you say some of those are callable?
No, none of those.
are callable.
No, there's no reason for them to. There are 2 positions that we purchased upon maturity in the portfolio in the previous 2 months, August and July, that have a call feature in them. And those are, I believe those are documented in my report.
Are there 2 or are there 3? Because looking at 6.1, there's 3 listed at $100,000 cost basis, maturing in 26, 27, and 28. And if I remember correctly, those are the 3 that had callable features, or am I incorrect on that?
The ones on this agenda
Mhm.
are not callable.
Okay.
Those are
So
CDs.
those are locked in, but we also have some other investments that we've made
2,
too, and for a total amount of,
750,000.
which have callable features if interest rates drop significantly. And again, just to reiterate, which I don't want to get too fancy, but there's been a significant inversion of the yield curve where shorter term debt has a higher interest rate than longer term debt, which is not typically what happens. So right now, what's financially most beneficial for us is to keep all of our money in a money market account. That's where we're getting the most liquidity and the highest rate of return, but that can change significantly. So there becomes a balance of, do you lock up money that you're not necessarily going to need for a longer period of time at a higher interest rate?
Right.
And as we can see, that can go against you as well, because when we did that before, our interest rates have gone spectacularly higher, and we would have been much better not doing that. So the conversations that we've had is, at what point in time do we decide to invest in longer term instruments with money that we have free that we're not currently projected to spend? And our decision was to revisit that in December, and maybe there'd be a little bit more clarity on changes in rates by then.
And one of the things we looked at was the Fed fund rate and the possibility or the percentages of what the likeliness is of the rate being dropped. So taking that into consideration as
And that was
well.
just a report that was presented to us by Fifth Third of taking the consideration of multiple traders and bonds
Right.
and their projections or bets as to what would happen with Fed funds over the next, I think it was 12 to 24 months.
And what we're talking about is a relatively small part of our portfolio that we might be making. Because as we just said, the other ones, it doesn't make sense. Losing too much. to try and gain something. But it's all about being able to extend further out. Want to make sure you maintain the ladder so that limits what we can do.
Correct.
Any other questions? Approve the investments.
Right. Dr. Lorenz?
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on for those who are watching on the screen. I just reiterated the motion that we made concerning accepting the financial reports and improving investments. And so Mr. Giuffre is calling the roll and I say yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Ms. Cecil?
Pass for a minute. Just a second. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Reverend Eiler?
Yes.
Dr. Schwetznow?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carried. The next item is to accept the donations that are listed. Is there a motion? Mrs. Washburn moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Swetchnow seconded. Those are to accept the donations listed in that agenda item. Any questions? As always, thanks for those donations. Mr. Giuffre?
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Dr. Schwetznow?
Yes.
Ms. Cecil?
Yes.
Reverend Eiler?
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes. Motion carried. Final item for resolution is to approve removal of inventory by gift, sale, or destruction. That inventory list is in a report under the agenda item. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Swetchnow moved. Is there a second? Mrs. Washburn seconded. This is to approve removal of those items. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Giuffre?
Dr. Schwetznow?
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Ms. Cecil?
Yes.
Reverend Eiler?
Yes.
And Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carried. Now, I believe we have an additional report from Mr. Giuffre.
I'm going to share my screen and hope that I can navigate well. What I wanted to start with tonight is just to review, first of all, last month's presentation about the potential increase. And what that might mean to a homeowner, what it might mean to us. And so this is the simple calculation, and I think I used my house here, that if my value increases, my market value increases by $100,000, the assessed value would be 35% of that, or 35,000. And so the total increase in taxes for unvoted or inside mills would be $350. And the school's portion would be 45.6% of that, or $160. Inversely, for the district, and on this one, I used 30, so that was closer to my illustration here, but if the class 1 property, because class 2 property really isn't being impacted by this. It's not moving. So this is just class 1, and I've rounded it so that the numbers are nice and even. Of $900 million was increased by 30%. That would be a $270 million market increase. And 1% of that, or 10 mills, would be $2.7 million, and 45.6% of that would be about $1.2 million for the district. And I have used our software. Now, our software takes into consideration class 1, class 2, and public utility personal property. So those aren't spot on to my simplified illustration up here, but those are the line items where those revenues would be received. And again, I'm just reviewing this graph is without the 4.9 mil levy, just to show historically that every 3-year reappraisal update truly doesn't have an impact to the district. And this is a timing difference, but this is the levy that was passed in 2014. If I took that levy out, we would have a pretty straight line coming across. So that was just to demonstrate that it's a fairly non-material transaction that occurs every 3 years. This is just a graph, and this will be on the webpage. And just for your convenience, the inflation, the rate of inflation has exceeded the value of properties. And then this is the inverse relationship between the increase of property values and the reduction factors that kick in to reduce the millage. So again, it's just a refresher. And then the last piece is that it is $82 a day for each student, cost per pupil for local taxes. That's how much is covered by that. So I just wanted to review that for the board.
Rob, just to go back, is to in like an historically high, at least in my recollection, increase in assessed property values. If it does go through at a 35% average increase, the school district will see $1.2 million in additional revenue per year.
About that.
And
Because it won't be exactly 35, because Warren's not moving and Hamilton's going to be a different rate, but yeah. correct.
but give or take a million-ish.
Oh,
And when will we know that? And when will we realize that? And then how does that go into our budgeting and forecasting in the future?
historically and typically we know this at the very end of the year because tax bills go out at the very beginning of the year. Some of the haggling that's going on in Columbus, they've even talked about delaying the tax bills until they fix it. So I think it'll stay tried and true, and that we'll have the true values. We've been told by Claremont County that we're at 38, and Hamilton that we're at 40, and then those will be averaged out because it has to be equalized throughout the district. So we should know by the end of December.
And so again, so we'll know by the end of December, and then the realization of that revenue will come as soon as
the tax duplicates go out in January.
Okay, so we would see 600,000 give or take in the first half, and 600,000 more give or take in the second half.
That's a great point. That was actually the whole point of the slide that I had.
I'm slow, so you have to reiterate slide.
I think I clicked off of that one there. Okay. And that's what this shows here is, yes, you receive half of it in the first because it's only 6 months of a tax year and 6 months of a fiscal year. And the full impact.
And so kind of my follow-up question to leave out for you as your final 5-year forecast for Loveland comes up in November, is that something that you anticipate that you'll put into the forecast? Is that unfair to put in the forecast because we really don't know what's going to happen?
We want it to be as real and accurate as possible. So in that category, especially because it is the most material line item that we have in revenues.
So, and again, do you anticipate that we probably will see the $1.2 million?
I do.
And so you think that in the forecast that we'll see in November, you'll be able to add an extra 1.2 million in revenue?
The only caveat is the one idea that's going pretty strong in Columbus is limiting the impact at like 7% per year. So if there's a increase like that exceeds 7%, 7% is all you receive. Whether or not they do that with 20 mil limit, they're even talking about moving the floor, which would be a disaster because our funding is based upon the floor, not for Loveland. But again, I don't think Loveland's going to have much of an impact, but that would be the only thing that they could do that would impact us is not the movement of the floor, but limiting the amount of award. I don't know how they're going to do that. This has a sunset provision that says it's good for 23, 4, and 5 tax years, and then it sunsets. And I don't know how they would even think about doing the math for that one.
Well, and so the reason that I brought that up is to pull those exact points out. How do you anticipate what's going to happen in the face of dramatic uncertainty when you're making a budget like that or a forecast like that?
For this one, that line item is 32, soon to be much more than that, $1 million. So what, for me, as a practitioner, what I'm looking at is what's the most probable thing that's going to happen, and not to shoot for the moon and not to be ultra conservative, but to try to come up with what is likely to happen. And if that changes, then, and it's material, then we change with it. I mean, we are able to recertify in the middle of the year if need be. I don't think it's necessary because we're not looking at a deficit situation. So we just adjust the numbers, and then May would be closer to what, well, we'll find out by May for sure. Let's see. So I'm going to go to my other presentation. If I can find it. There it is. Okay.
One question on that. You're using 30%. Do you believe that to be
We've already,
conservative?
the numbers that we received so far from Hamilton County is 40% for Loveland and 38% for Claremont County.
Okay, because I'm hearing 47, but that's okay.
Yeah, it depends on where you live, because I will tell you the biggest dramatic difference is a railroad track in between Lockland and Wyoming. Lockland's going up the lowest and Wyoming's going up the most, or pretty close to that. It's an interesting perspective. So stop sharing and start sharing again, Adam. Okay. Very good. So what I wanted to do now is talk about how the forecast compares to the budget. And before I do that, let me just throw, I'm going to do that one more time. Start sharing again. I'm just going to throw the forecast up quickly just so that I can use it for reference. I can find it. Where is it? Oh. Nope. There. Share it again. So next month, the superintendent and I will go through, Mike and I will go through this document, which represents hundreds and thousands of transactions and rolls into this one-page document that gives us perspective. And one thing I want to guide you to is a document called How to Read a 5-Year Forecast that you can find on my webpage and also at the Department of Education. It's a very concise read, and it has some very good points that I often have made. And I would encourage you, when you look at our forecast, to have it sitting to your left and the forecast to the right. But I just wanted to orient you this month for next month that the 3-year, these columns that say actual are the 3 previous fiscal years. And this is the current year that we are living in. Now, this is last year, so this will be 24 when I present next month. And where we're really focused on this is out to years 3, 4, and 5, which are the 4th year to today, the 3rd year and the 2nd year, and primarily focused on line 6.010. And in this document, it'll tell you that that's the most important line on the forecast. So just keeping that in mind, and I'll reference this more next month, I wanted to just share that with you because I think it's important to be able to understand that.
Those numbers just disappeared, but I just want to clarify, that was the 5-year forecast that was approved in May.
Correct.
Thank you.
So now I want to kind of go through that as I share again. And well, I'm no more jumping around after this one, I promise. So in the current year, what we operate from is what's called budgetary compliance. And even in this How to Read a 5-Year Forecast, it says, there's the oversight of the budgetary process is pretty strong. And this will be on my webpage. So I've listed all of the Ohio Revised Code sections that dictate what we do with our forecast. And it is a timeline that, for the most part, lasts 2 years. Starting by January 15th, we have to file the budget with the County Budget Commission. And between then and the end of July, the amounts and rates come out. They're supposed to come out in March, but typically Hamilton County has them out in April and files an extension. The amounts and rates come to the board to verify how much is being collected and at what rate they're being collected. And then at the end of July, we are certifying the unencumbered balances as we start the year. In June, the board will approve the temporary appropriations. And then last month, by the 1st of October, they approved the appropriations and we're off for the rest of the year. This equation is a simplification of what we have to abide by. So revenues have to be equal to or less than estimated revenues, have to be equal to or less than appropriations, which have to be less than or equal to expenditures. That's what the law says. And the code sections are here. You have, well, I'm just leave it at that. There are, those code sections will give you whatever information you want, too little or too much, but that is in the first column after the actuals on the forecast. I tie the book to the forecast for a reason, because the reports that the board just approved tie to the forecast and as well in that column. So that's how they know they've got it all, and that's how they know where they are. And the forecast then shows where we're going. And so when I'm working on a forecast, and I've said this my whole career, there are 3 reasons for an estimate to be different than the actual. It's either a timing difference, and I will be showing you one, or something changed, or the estimate's wrong. It's that simple. So when I'm making an estimate, the one, if you know nothing else, the historical number is the best number you can use. If you have a consistent historical trend, then you can use that. But knowing facts that are probable and measurable are what we use for the big numbers, like for state funding. All that stuff that Mr. Collier was just talking about is factored into how the calculations are made. The number of students, the estimated, not the estimated, the actual assessed value per student, the median income per student, and a lot of other numbers, depending on the type of student, get factored in for the state numbers. And for real estate, it is as simple as dividing the number of children into the total assessed valuation. And the other way that we know even better, and this isn't for this forecast, but it is for estimating, is if you are provided the exact value by a source for revenue, that's grants and state aid. So that would be all of those lines, all those that calculation above are everything's equal to each other, because you have to spend all of it. And this information, a lot of this information resides on my webpage. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll find these documents. And there's a plus sign at the bottom. I think sometimes folks miss that'll give you even more. But the monthly forecast, and I call it a financial binder, but it's a monthly report, has 4 reports in it. I'm going to show you in just a minute. And I think it's very helpful to have that. There's a 10,000 foot view, and there's in the trees, deep line by line detail. And then also there's contracts and handbooks and all kinds of information. And the way you get there is let me see, keep going. Yeah. Oh, and there's a link on there for the public records request page. So you can see other questions that folks have, or requests for records that other folks have had that you might have. I try to give as a best of a description as possible. And then there's the Ohio checkbook. The link is on the page for Ohio checkbook. And the way you can get to all this information is on our webpage, on the drop-down menu for administration, select treasurer, and you will get this page of, hey, what's going on there? That's not me. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I like that picture a lot better than mine, and there'll be another picture there in a few months. But those links are right here. So the monthly binder, and this one's from June. This is what the front page looks like, and it's got a table of contents. But I'm going to take the table of contents. I'm going to mix it up because I want to start with at the highest level and come down with you. But that you can go back to 2022 and find those. So this report is, and I'm going to show my age. This report is called, it historically was called the SM1 and SM2. So the SM1 was state module 1, and it had to be completed for the year by a certain date. And then you had to submit the report for actual every quarter. it's a very valuable report because it gives you month by month what the variance is between what was estimated and what was actual. And again, there are many, many numbers that roll up to this, but these are the same line items that are on that forecast that I just showed you a few minutes ago, and I will show you next month. So that's a very high level view. This next view is a one pager that is an executive level view where you can see what was forecasted, what was what happened from that forecasted point, and the differences. So the differences are variances, and again, timing, something changed, or we're wrong, right? So what I did was just to, and I'm sorry it's so small. I can see it because it's on my screen, but I know that it might be difficult to see. So what I did was I just went through line by line and showed the percentage of difference between the estimate and the actual from the May forecast. And you can see the percentages, and again, this will be on my webpage, but if just take these 5 line items and add them all up, I think the difference between the variance is like $138,000, which is less than 0.5%, 93% of our revenue. Just let that linger. And so with that, we do have 2 line items that have differences. And on this one, this is called all other operating revenue. And I'm hoping I can do this. I think I can. Yeah, I'm going to show you what I saw when I looked at this, but this is not a line item on that forecast that you want to mess with because it's not a large number. And when I looked at where it was before, leading up to this, there wasn't anything to justify putting a larger number there. And it is an immaterial difference. But there were 2 transactions that came in, or there were 2 transactions that affected this the most. But in this line item, there's 22 different line items that come together, and they can be volatile. In 2021, we didn't collect any fees because of COVID. So making sure that the number that's out in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th year is more accurate is more important than changing that number because I know that I got that much more in this year. So I did not touch that. And I'll look at that a little closer with you. And then here, total other financing resources, there is no trend in this one, and I will show you that one as well. So revenues, total revenues, we're at 1.53%, and anything that's within 2% is a decent estimate. It's a very decent estimate. Expenditures 1.57%. Again, a very decent estimate. These are 54, 52, 53 million dollar numbers, and so certainly a small percentage of this number will make a larger percentage on this number. It's a favorable variance. It's a favorable outcome. $1.9 million hardly gets me through a payday. So in my experience, I don't see that as being something that I would have done differently, but it has been questioned, and I just wanted to share it with you. And I am going to hopefully be able to go to this slide as opposed to that one. Oh, right, it worked. So I did 10 years worth here, just so you could see on other line item or other revenue. This is the projected on other revenues on this top line. And so I'm sorry it's so hard to see, but again, you can go out and see it on the webpage. So I would, for this one, when I'm looking at the actuals, which is this line, I took a 3-year average, and in that 3-year average, I added the TIF payment that we did not receive in the prior year. So this is over under on the estimate. So in the prior year, the estimate was over because we did not get the $334,000 TIF payment. The TIF payment came in the following year. In addition to that, and that's why the estimate is so far under. In addition to that, I did not affect any change on investment earnings because we received a significant number more than what I had estimated, because I don't know how long rates are going to be at 5%, but I'm not going to affect this line item in the forecast without better information, and better information is what we get by the end of the year and what we receive when we talk to our advisor. You can see in the chart in the graph that the over under move together, and there's a significant difference between 22 and 23. This will go back down next year. So affecting the forecast beyond the current year would not have been something that I would do. And then with the other line item, I can tell you what this graph means. That means there is no trend. And I will tell you that other treasurers before me have used an estimate of 0. These were the estimates back in 10 years ago. And but what this is it's Medicaid reimbursement. And as all things governmental, it's wonky. So in 2020, we finally received 2017 and 2018 in that year. And I am sure that nobody estimated that. In 19, we received a payment, or in 2021, we received the payment for 19, nothing in 2022. And then in 2023, we received the payment for 2020, or the reimbursement of $341,000. The reason it goes in here is because the line item is called return of a prior year expenditure. And it's a program. But I just wanted you to kind of get a feel for my logic and reasoning when I'm doing this. But
Rob, I'm sorry, can you just go back to that last, just to prove the point? And just cut off at the bottom right of that slide, go down with me one more click. In fiscal year 2024, I mean, we may receive reimbursements for both 21 and 22. However, 21 reimbursements will.
no, I didn't make the box big enough.
Yeah.
Shoot. Will
But-
not be much because it was COVID year.
Well, and to my point, it's very hard to figure, how could you possibly put that into a forecast?
Well, I typically don't. I've tried to pick a number in the middle that's not going to have any materiality to it, just in case. But if some years you get it and some years you don't, there's no trend. But that's what that graph, that's when I did that graph, I cracked up, because that's definitely what that says, is there's no trend.
So that's for Medicaid. What about private insurance?
Medicaid reimbursement for our students.
Right. What about private insurance reimbursement? Children that don't qualify for Medicaid, or does everybody?
I don't have that in here
Okay.
right now, but we can talk about that. That's a interesting idea. So now getting a little further into the trees, this section, and again, these go back to 2022. This section shows the amount that matches the top with the difference in estimated and actual revenues, estimated and actual expenditures, both about 1.5%, and then the ending balance. And this shows the cash flow, monthly cash flow. This is what we would use for investments with regards to that blue line that rides over the top. So we would, once we have our forecast, we can tell how far out we can go with an investment comfortably to maintain our number one priority, which is liquidity. And as you go through this, it will point out things within the forecast that you might want to look at that are material. And with this information, you can, and it's what we just looked at before, it's just a little more focused on each area. And from this information, I'm sorry, it will be on my page, but I'm going to show you what, get to the punchline real quick, is you can go down here to the analytical piece, the real detailed stuff, and you can see 3 different views. One view is 21, 22, 23. So the current year, the 3 years, what it does is it will show you at this point in time in 21 and 22, next year it'll be 22, 23. This is where we were. And here is the year over year difference between those 2 columns. So that's what this particular section is. And
These all end of year forecasts?
no, this is just the last one I put out. I won't put another one out till December because the forecast won't be approved until then.
When I look at your sheet, it says projection from current 5-year forecast. So that was May's forecast,
What sheet? Oh, yeah, this would be.
page 22.
Am I there yet?
You're past there,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah,
I'm
this is,
just asking that you actually put the month in there so that we know what,
it's on the
it's
first
comparing.
page that I showed when it first started. Yeah. Yes,
because I'm looking on down and I'm going, okay, when we're talking about this, what is this? The November 5-year forecast?
no,
or was
no one
this
look at the
end
screen
of
right now
year
because it'll hurt your
forecast?
eyes.
It was May. And it'd just be nice to have that on the page so you know what you're looking at.
It is at the beginning, monthly report. So each one will say activity through May, activity through each one of those. And that, again, bottom right-hand corner. And you can actually, it's right here, of the page. Yeah. So there's April, I've got May.
June's right above it.
Okay, yeah. December. It looks like I missed putting March out there. but it does say on the front, and so don't look. Give me a second, I'll get back down there. Okay, so then the other two sections of the analytical part, if I can slide it over and get it large enough. There we go. And it says it right at the top, actually. It's not easy to find, but it's in between. Let me go back up to the top so the screen is not scrolling as quickly as my computer, which is confusing me. Okay, there. This will tell you right here, revenue by receipt code monthly. And so that analytic was the one no, let's go up a little bit more. The first one I was showing you is fiscal year to date by object code and by receipt code. The next one is the actual month. So for the month of June in 2021, 21, 22, 23, this is the activity and then the comparison of the year over year from each of the two pairs. And then finally is the detail of forecast versus cash flow and that variance, which is a more detailed restatement of what we were looking at up above when I was showing the percentages of variance. So
Rob, just to go back to reiterate Linda's question, when you have that and you refer to a forecast and it's June, are you referring to the updated May forecast or do you leave the November as the comparator?
that's a great question. And I'll just say this. I grew up that November was it, just like October was it for student count. November was it. Well, actually it was October. The one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to shoot and then move the target where I shot. I want to learn from that. But also, as long as I know what it is and I can explain it, and it's not a variable that's going to have a negative impact on the long-term accountability with that forecast, then it's more important to understand and to maintain the largest numbers are the most important ones. The volatile numbers, like the other, is not as important, but it is important not to make it look, not to exaggerate it the further out you go. So I felt very good with the top 5 largest line items that we had being that close tolerance. I feel like those are really good numbers.
Well, and to me, just looking at the explanations, there's very, to me, reasonable explanations for what those differences would be. And, if somebody wanted to know, they could ask.
Right. And if I were to adjust, and I know this may not sound right, but I'm an accountant, so forgive me. If I were to adjust it, it would just be to make me feel better. Because nobody likes to be wrong, but if how folks look at it and understand it is what's important. And the other thing too is that even on these monthlies, there's detailed footnotes that talk about each line item, just as there is in the forecast. And the other thing that the how to read a forecast says is concise. You got to be concise. Sometimes I go on too long because I think there's a right amount of
How
number.
many pages are in that report?
A few. It's only 26. But I wanted just to say two things as I finish this, because we're talking about the confidence of the public and trust and transparency and all of those things. And I want to let you know, what should make you feel good and sleep at night. After my disclaimer of this, I'm using the Department of Education, which may have a new name with the new House bill and the new year, and I'm using facts based upon 2023. So coming into 2024, some of the terminology and things may change. There is a line item in the 5-year forecast that will be changed in revenues. It'll have a new name. I haven't memorized it yet, but just so you know, this is based upon last year. So that's my disclaimer. And then the sleep at night stuff. We have compliance oversight from all of these agencies, and these are point and clicks. So you can go to the County Budget Commission and see what they do. They are the oversight for our current year finances. We have to get their approval for the board to approve appropriations. And if something changes, we have to get their approval. The auditor of state, they do annual audits. They can do biennial or early audits if they feel there's a need to. So every year the auditor of state comes in and does a very comprehensive, thorough audit that has hundreds of hours in it. The Department of Education, my goodness, we might as well give them an office here because their oversight on our forecast, our funding for state and federal grants, licensure for everyone in the district, EMIS, all of that stuff that Garth went through, they're responsible for it. If you want to find them, talk to him and ask him how it works, but it is very complicated. Auxiliary service, which is their fiscal oversight for our auxiliary services, which are private parochial schools that we were fiscal accountants for, and then the comprehensive continuous improvement plan. The Ohio Department of Medicaid audits us every year. The Secretary of State has the public records and sunshine law and ballot issues, governs over that. The Treasurer of State has the Star Ohio, which is our short-term investments. The checkbook, which you saw earlier, it's on my site. The state pooled collateral, and CPIM, which is my license in order to be, or permit in order to be able to invest, make our investments outside of Star Ohio. The Federal Communications Commission, because they oversee the E-rate program, which is monies that we receive to reimburse us for certain expenditures that are allowable through that federal grant or federal program. And then the Loveland community. And so the Treasurer's webpage has what I think the Loveland community would want or need. And if you don't, you call me, I am more than happy to go through it with you. But here are all of the audits and reporting that I have experienced in my time here at Loveland, and I've been here just over 2 years. The annual gap basis financial and compliance audit, in which there were no findings, had the special investigation unit in here, and they had no findings. Just this week, we had STRS and SCRS, or last week, STRS and SCRS in here auditing the state auditor was auditing our state retirement teachers and our state employee retirement plans. APHIS is a required annual report for our debt, people who hold our debts, and it's overseen by the Securities, or required by the Securities and Exchange Commission. The Department of Education has all that. Again, this will be on my webpage, but all of these have happened in the time I've been here. Some are every 5 years, some are every year, and some are just roll of the dice. There's Department of Medicaid and Workers' Comp. So, and I spelled out the alphabet soup because I know we have more acronyms than the military because I've been in both. So just so you know, we have so much oversight over what we do. It's a lot. And I will tell you that it makes me feel good because when our audit comes out squeaky clean and we get a thumbs up, it lets me know that everybody else can feel good about the work that we're doing in the Treasurer's office and the decisions that are made by this board and administration. And I'm very proud. That's all.
Thank you. Additional questions on that?
Sorry if I went on too long.
We do have one more.
I just want to add real fast, Rob. I know that you're proud of the work that you do, and I completely respect the work that you do. And I know that it's hard when it appears that you're being questioned about the work that you do when clearly you know what you're talking about. So I have always appreciated your communication with us and the community, and just want to reiterate that if people have questions about something that doesn't make sense to them, rather than posting on social media and trying to cause problems, it's probably better to ask. And I don't know that you've ever turned anybody away who's come with a reasonable question for you about why we report something the way that we do, or why we forecast something the way that we do.
And if one person has a question, someone else must. And that's one of the reasons the records log's out there, is because I was getting multiples of the same question. And I appreciate what you just said, because it's, when you do take your work personally, because it represents the school and it represents you. But my integrity is all I have. But I hope that the time that I've been here, that it's viewed that way. And so I've been very grateful of your support. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do still have the one question. Some of this report was based on questions that have been asked, and in particular was a question asked of the board for answers in writing before our next meeting, which was this meeting. I was not able to provide those answers in writing because I can't answer for the whole board unless the whole board gives me that. So again, this is some of what Mr. Giuffre has just reported on was a question that was asked of us. So I submitted it as a request. It has been determined that it is not a records request because there are not records responsive to it, but it is asking for information and asking for a written response from the board. So I am asking board consensus of, is what we report sufficient? What we have reported as sufficient? Is what we will report concerning the November adoption of the 5-year forecast sufficient? Or is the board interested in writing a response? And if so, it will need to be crafted jointly before it can be a written response.
Everybody's looking at me. It's like,
No, I'm looking up and
I was
down the
looking back,
table.
I was looking back at Kathy because I'm like, I don't even know what question I'm trying to respond to.
There was a board email received September 29th that was asking for a written response.
I think the answers in the financial binder will answer a lot of that. I had not seen those reports before,
Which reports?
the financial binder of the quarterly.
Okay, you had, but they have been in
We
existence,
have,
correct?
we have 2 of them out there. So I think that will help a great deal. And I'm sure the individual will ask additional questions if we didn't answer.
And I didn't put the June binder out until recently, so.
Can you make sure the March one gets out?
Actually, I'm not sure. I will look, but I may have missed the opportunity because you have to run them at that point in time.
Yeah.
But, I
And
mean,
we're only running them quarterly.
no, run them monthly,
We're running them monthly. Then
but I
we-
can't run them until the forecast has been approved. So the first one would be well, it could be for November, but that's the month that the forecast is approved. So the one that's 22, the first one I put out was December 22.
And the answer to that question is for the November forecast, then the monthly reports that are run from that, regardless of if there is a May update to the forecast.
The May
Or
update would include it.
The
That's
May
why
update would be.
I only did the 4.9
Okay.
on
So
that one.
basically, July, August, September, October, November, and December. You're gonna have 6 months that you're going to, at that point, compare to the forecast that's
Well,
approved
November would be
next
when,
month.
when the forecast is allowable. They used to be this October, but they decided that it probably made more sense for November because there's a lot of ballot issues on and it
Mhm.
changes the forecast completely. And the letters go out in December based upon that forecast. So that's why they changed it to November. But that is when the first forecast goes out. Mhm. And then there's financials, there's budgetary. So
Well, and I think going back to the point, and one of the things that we've tried to do, and I think has been unsuccessful, not through anyone in particular's fault, is just to make sure that the plethora of information that we share, people know where it is and how to access
Right.
it. And all we can do is talk about it as much as we can and hope that somebody picks it up. But again, if anybody has questions, I know that you're available to answer that and steer them in the right direction.
right. And it's the October 17th. At the moment, there's many decisions that have not been made in December in Columbus to be able to put something together that's going to be tried and true.
Makes it a little difficult.
A little bit.
I mean, ultimately, it's public funding, and the idea is to get the numbers to the community, so that they can see how the money's being spent.
There's a
Right.
reconciliation every month
Right.
with bank balances and then there's financial reports for revenues and expenditures. And the ones that are in there are what will tie to the forecast, but they're the estimates that we'll use for the forecast.
Well, and I teased you to a little bit about a 26-page report, but quite honestly, there's some people who would prefer 26 pages. And I think it's good to put out more information rather than less, as long as we can also have some ability for people who eyes glaze over by page 2 to also have an idea of what's going on.
Which again is why you pointed out the 6.0, whatever that number was, line in the forecast. That's the most important section. As you said, the state document lays out that is in fact the most, because it speaks to the trend over the long term. And that's what we're really trying to keep an eye on as board members. Where are we going to be 4 or 5 years from now with funding structure as it is? And how do we manage from there?
And then next month I remember, I thought I was going to do it this month, but next month I'll remember to show folks where they can go pull the forecasts since for the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years off the Department of Education's website.
All right. And it just looks like the question that many of us always have, is going to wait a little bit longer, depending on what Columbus does, to see what our effective millage will be.
Our effective millage should be the same. Meaning the same as, and I had that on there. I don't think.
I thought
showed that
you were
slide.
going to show that slide. I thought our effective millage was changing based on the evaluation.
I did not slide all the way down. Yes, our effective millage. The official effective millage, what I calculated, you're right, the official effective millage coming from the county, which that's the amounts and rates that we receive in March, April. What I calculated that I didn't scroll all the way down on is that we
And you're
were
not
at
sharing
30.
the screen anymore, so.
No, I'm
but I
not.
think that's a number you can just
We,
get.
we were at 36.9 prior to the levy. After the levy and with reappraisal, we could be at 32.15, but you're right, we need that number from the Department of Taxation in Columbus. Once they have all the laws figured out.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, I think we've reached the end of treasurer reports then. We have one more item this evening, and that is the Business Advisory Council Plan. Dr. Puerta, do you have any report on that? Okay, I don't know if people on screen could hear that, but we have one more item on the agenda, and that is a motion to approve the Business Advisory Council Plan for the 23-24 school year. It is posted on board docs. There was a report from Mrs. Washburn concerning that. So I would entertain a motion to approve that plan.
So moved.
Dr. Swetchnow moved, and I'll second that motion. And so, as you heard from Dr. Puerta, we'll have a report out on that next month, but this is a legal requirement that we approve this plan.
I would just like to say, I think this is a really great thing. And I'm 100% behind it, but I would like one piece of information, or maybe two. How much of our student information is shared? And is it individual or group? And how do we make sure it doesn't go beyond where it's going? Well, are we just, that's the question. Is it anybody who takes this test? Are we making their information available?
What
Available
test?
to whom?
It's like an aptitude test, isn't it? To,
We're
Different.
talking about the Business Advisory Council Plan with this item.
and if you read into it,
The ASVAB students sign up for and their parents consent. In the military.
well, I understand they consent, but I'm just asking how much information is shared? Is it just, hang on a second.
So how much information is shared in the Business Advisory Council from those tests?
To the Business Advisory
Got it.
Council.
Okay.
And how do we make sure it doesn't go elsewhere? It's security of student information.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's never any personally identifiable information shared in
great.
there. Even whenever we're talking about like internships and pre-apprenticeships,
Mhm.
when Drew's shares out about that, he has a separate sheet that doesn't have any student names on it.
Okay.
It's more like numbers, like how many students are in the agricultural field, how many students are in the medical field, that kind of thing, and where are they? But we're not sharing even student names really.
Okay, great. That's what I needed to know.
Was there anything, was there a second
Nope,
question? Okay.
that answers all of it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Dr. Schwetzner,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Cecil,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Any other business to come before this board? Any other numbers you want to put up on the screen? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Washburn moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Swetchnow seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I have them, any opposed? Anybody wants to stay here for a while? I have our meeting adjourned at 8:19. Thank you. Thank you all for hanging in there with us.